Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week's live web series, or the ADSW web series for short. My name is Roble Velasco Rosenheim, and I'm the Director for Global Partnerships in APAC at the IREX Standard Foundation. I'm delighted to be your host for this episode. So let's start with a bit of background. ADSW is a global initiative championed by the UAE and its clean energy powerhouse, Masdar. It is designed to accelerate sustainable development and advance economic, social, and environmental progress around the world. This live web series is one of ADSW's year-round platforms. It hosts dialogue on key issues and topics that are shaping the global sustainability agenda. By welcoming thought leaders to share their insights and approaches to addressing the world's most pressing challenges, the series is committed to facilitating knowledge exchange and boosting climate ambition. All of this comes together in support of ADSW's purpose: to be a global platform that accelerates sustainable development and advances economic, social, and environmental progress. Today, we're going to be talking about decarbonizing economic growth. And we'll do so by discussing renewable energy certificates, which I'll refer to as RECs, and we'll talk about how this instrument can be used to reduce the carbon values of goods, and that of exports in particular. We'll also talk about environmental trade agreements, and specifically the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. We'll then put these ideas together in practice, hearing from our experts on how RECs can be used to decrease the carbon value of goods, and importantly, to address tax exposure under CBAM. With that, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Well, you already know me. I'm Roble Velasco Rosenheim, and in just a moment, I'll start us off with a short intro on RECs. This is really just to ensure we're all using the same language, and then we'll move on to the exciting content. From there, we'll hear from Jasmine on the role of the Thai utility EGAT in supporting local exporters to decarbonize. Jasmine's full name is Malchutar Kingnet, and she is the head of the Renewable Energy Business Section at the Electricity Generation Authority of Thailand, or EGAT for short. Jasmine has been an integral part of establishing and operationalizing essentially the entire Thai REC system, and she knows all there is to know about REC ecosystem development and, more recently, corporate decarbonization. After Jasmine, we'll hear from Anita on import and export perspectives from China, perhaps the most significant supply chain hub in the world. Anita's full name is Wang Jian, and she is the Executive General Manager of the Marketing and Operation Department of China's National Machinery Import and Export Corporation. She is an absolute thought leader in this space, and one of the first people in China to start directly looking at how IREX can support national exporters to decarbonize in the context of global trade agreements. Her perspectives on the market will pave the way for thousands of companies looking to decarbonize in transparent and globally credible ways. It's an absolute honor to have her with us here today. And last but certainly not least, we'll hear from Julie Cunningham, who's the Global Head of Tax and Risk at Emirates Global Aluminum, or EGA. Julie has an exceptionally difficult job, right? So first of all, she has to actually understand CBAM from a tax perspective. This is a particularly difficult task, given that CBAM is still being written and drafted, and that it spans dozens of industries and environmental topics. More difficult still, however, is that she needs to understand how RECs fit into that broader picture, and how to use them to reduce tax exposure under a policy that's still being formulated. Of course, this places Julie on the absolute cutting edge of CBAM and economic decarbonization. She'll be sharing her views today on what's happening and what to expect next. I'm personally very excited to learn from each of our speakers today. But for now, let's start off with a quick bit of background on RECs, essentially talking about what they are and why they matter in this context. So I'll share my screen and we'll get that going. So the basic concept behind a renewable energy certificate, or a REC, is that it's an instrument that tells us where our electricity comes from, all right? Now, this comes out of a global context where we had pre-RECs, essentially different kinds of power generation taking place, which you have pictured on the left-hand side of your screen. And all of these different IPPs or generation sources are feeding colorless electrons into a shared grid, right? Those electrons get sent around and eventually end up in the hands of end users when you turn on your lights or power your factories. Sadly, in this image, however, the end user, pictured on the right, has no way of making credible claims to the source of its power generation. So income RECs, and this is basically a book and claim system. So power is generated, and we call this the booking activity. We stamp that generation with a serial number. We'll hear more about that over the course of today. The electrons still go into the grid as they would before, but that certificate is separated out and can be transferred to an end user so that that end user can make associated claims to the type of electricity it's consumed. So again, a REC is essentially a way of telling us where electricity comes from. This can be used to denominate power purchase agreements, on-site solar installations, or they can be transacted unbundled from physical electricity. A little bit more to add to that, and I'm going to move this over so you guys can see this portion of my screen. These are some of the specific facts that a REC captures, right? The first is very simple. It's that 1 megawatt hour of physical power was generated using a renewable source of energy. That second bullet point is giving us the second, third, and fourth facts that are captured in the REC. And that's essentially when the power was generated, and we can get that down to the 15-minute interval if we're working with special data partners. It tells us where that power was physically generated, and it also tells us who generated that megawatt hour of power. The third bullet point is a fact about facts, and it's basically telling us all of the information above has been captured and confirmed against a trusted source. That's what the IREC Standard Foundation does, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Last, but perhaps most important, it tells us the REC captures ownership. So it tells us that these green attributes belong to someone. They can be transacted and sold to another party and ultimately claimed and used by the recipient or the purchaser of that REC. I mentioned that the IREC standard sets rules and essentially defines how these systems are tracked. This is a fairly complicated organogram, and I'm not going to go through it in too much detail. The basic principle here is that there are different categories of markets. There are rule-setting entities like ourselves, and we essentially define how different instruments can be developed and tracked. On the right-hand side here, you see how we're applying this to different product codes. So the IREC-E for electricity is the one that's most commonly used. We're working on hydrogen product codes, biogas, and similar. So that's taking place in this top box. The middle box is where a lot of the implementation takes place. And this is where you would have entities like code managers that would come in and say, facilitate the actual market. You could have data partners that would come in and provide supporting data, and that information can be fed into local issuers. Essentially, this middle box is just explaining how the markets are implemented. The last aspect of the box talks about, the last box on the bottom talks about the different entities that are actually transacting in this market. You'll see beneficiaries here on the bottom right-hand side, and this is really the entities that are going to be described in some of our journey today. So Jasmine and her organization, EGAT, represent the local issuance function, and EGA and Anita's entity represent beneficiaries or potential end users of these RECs. All of this information is used to feed into different reporting and disclosure frameworks. So essentially, RE100, CDP, Science-Based Targets Initiative are all different areas where large corporations and their supply chains may choose to voluntarily disclose the kinds of electricity they consume, and they use RECs to do so. I'm not going to give too much details for now on CBAM because we've got our speakers talking about that later. And I'll end out on these two maps that just sort of show the distribution of different REC systems around the world. The North American RECs market, which covers the US and Canada, has an independent system. The EU operates on what's called the Guarantee of Origin market, and rest of world markets currently operate on the IREC standard. Here is a breakdown of the ways that we work with local partners, and I'll shift this over again so you can see the local partners that we work with. This is essentially delegating all of the responsibilities, management functions of the market to different entities within that specific country. So that's all I've got in terms of context on RECs. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome our next speaker, Jasmine, to give us a talk about her experience with EGAT. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roble, and greeting to all the members of panels, Julie and Anita. And thank you to Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week for this initiative. I'm pleased to share the perspective of my organization. So today we are talking about the labeling emission on trade goods, which the energy sectors play an important role on this. So Electricity Generating Authority of Thailand, or EGAT. We are the state-owned enterprise under the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Finance. Our principal mission is electricity generation, with the total installed capacity of 17,000 megawatt, electricity procurement and selling to distribution network within Thailand and the neighboring country, including Laos, PDR, and Malaysia. We have set policy on eco-friendly electricity generation and aim to achieve EGAT carbon neutrality by 2050 in order to create a balance between electricity generation costs, environmental impact, and the country power system security. And today, when we're talking about the energy transition, it is a key process to attain the goals of carbon neutrality and support for the usage of green power in exporting industry. And I would like to emphasize the obstacle that the exporters are facing and the ongoing efforts to address them. For the fact that ASEAN is the fourth largest exporting region in the world, as its member states have developed more sophisticated manufacturing capabilities, their exports have diversified. With a strong manufacturing base and competitive labor force, ASEAN can become an important regional player in rapidly growing economic value chains for sustainable energy equipment and solutions. And also, we touching about the product carbon footprint has gained much attention in recent years, as many national and international standards have been formulated, as well as several labeling schemes. Thailand have also made an effort in this direction for the past several years, and is the fact that the first country in the Southeast Asian region to have developed national guidelines for carbon footprint calculation and labeling. During the process, have conducted product carbon footprint for pilot studies. Many issues have concern were raised, some of which may be common in all countries, while some were more specific for country exporting their products. But the principles have how we can communicate and align with the international standards. So when conducting the product emission footprint exercise, one of the first issue encountered was the complexity of the exporter and their supply chain activities due to the inefficient use of energy and unverified, making it more difficult to trace an exact source of the material emission content and the challenging of the data collections. And lastly, large corporates around the world were increasingly committing to net zero operation. It will be difficult, if impossible, for them to maintain and increase their investment if they not have access to clean energy. For domestic ASEAN business with ambition grow their global trade, it will also become increasingly important to have a green source of energy supplies. As changing in the market condition in their export destination will either mean market will be closed off without it, or some form of carbon tag that Julie will discuss later on, that will be exports on those exports for sure. So in my opinion, a potential solution to focus on specifying energy consumption, for instance, the adoption of renewable energy can immediately and significantly reduce global carbon emission. To achieve this, it is essential to establish a dependable international mechanism for implementation, both compliant and also voluntary, such as renewable energy certificate that Robert just mentioned, or even carbon credit in supporting local requirements and circumstances. ultimately, the corporate should acquire up-to-date information and education that align with the uniform standards to ensure harmony with their trading partner. So, for example, like Thailand, we are trading to European country and we use the local standard that is unable to communicate with the CBAM or the regulation out of Thailand country. So this is very important to create a structure for seamless integration and preparation for electricity and trading market in consistent principle for the future. So this is the key message that I would like to share. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jasmine. That's really just excellent. Anita, you can start sharing your screen if you like. And Jasmine, I've got some really nice notes on your presentation, so we'll certainly circle back with questions in a bit. But Anita, we'll send it over to you.
It's a great pleasure to be invited here, sharing with all of you about what we have been doing and our perspectives. As Robo introduced just now, I'm from China National Machinery Import and Export Corporation. As its name shows, our main business is import and export. In fact, we have been doing international trade for more than 70 years since its establishment in 1950, with a total trade volume of more than 150 billion US dollars in more than 100 countries and areas. And now we have about 40 branches and subsidiaries all over the world. Dated back to the past 70 years, we have created many firsts during China's import and export history. As the forerunner of new China's machinery import and export industry, we contributed a lot to the advanced technology and equipment imports. Over the years, we have imported a large number of complete plans and technologies about transportation, electric power, environmental protection, and telecommunication, including China's first commercial airplane, first automobile, first locomotive, first refrigerator production line, and etc., as well as more than 600 aircrafts, 1,000 ships, more than 1 million vehicles, and other industrial machineries from all over the world. On the export side, we have done much more than import. We exported China's first cargo ship, first real transport vehicle, and first float glass factory. After years of experiences accumulation, we have been involved in international business through investment, project contracting, trade, financing, and other related services. In the process of our own growth, we have also helped a large number of Chinese enterprises to go to the world. For the recent years, we pay more attention to green development while focusing on new energy, environment-friendly business. For instance, up to now, we have a total installed capacity of new energy power stations exceeds 500 megawatts worldwide, of which 300 megawatts are in Europe. While focusing on our own green development, we are considering what we can do for our partners as well as always. Actually, that's our mission, to help more companies to go to the world. For the reason, China nowadays has become recognized as the world's most significant supply chain hub and a manufacturing center, which means excellent volumes are being imported and exported to the other parts of the world, catching up with the vast ESG wave and making our international trading right on it become vital to our mission. It's always hard to manage different parties to make concrete commitments to each other when they speak different languages and stick to different rules. So it becomes a natural conclusion that AREC makes it easier for everyone to erase the barriers. Our company decided to be a registered participant in the AREC community a month ago, and will work closely with ecosystem partners to serve China's economies by using the standard as the same language and the same role. The same as globally. The same as globally accepted standard is a common language for the participants involved in the world market. Reliable data is also another form of common language. This is another crucial reason for us to decide to follow the AREC standard because of the granularity and transparency of the data. It solved the potential trust issue when AREC local data verifier Barwell presented us with the installation of their IoT data monitoring and centralized tracing system on more than 3,000 renewable energy power plants in China, which indicates the renewable energy source with real-time monitoring. The significant traceability data makes the green certificates much more than an issued document, but a live stream evidence for auditing purposes. We're fully convinced that with the granularity and transparency, AREC will be the right choice to ensure our international tracing partners have no concerns about the ESG regulations. That's all I want to share with you today. Thank you for your time, and we are willing to connect with you in the near future. Thank you.
Tremendous thanks to you, Anita. Extremely interesting to hear about sort of the exporter's perspective. We're going to shift over to Julie now to get essentially a second perspective on exports with a little bit more specialization in the areas of CBAM. So we've gone through now, we've got a very good concept for China's sort of appetite and experience in export markets. And now we'll look at sort of the logistics of what that means to operate under the new normal of CBAM. Over to you, Julie. We'll just ask you to pop into presentation mode.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much, Robo, and to the wider IREC team, and also the Abu Dhabi Sustainability team for inviting us here today to be part of this. So my name is Julie Cunningham. As Robo introduced me, I'm the head of tax for Emirates Global Aluminium. Emirates Global Aluminium is the world's largest premium aluminium producer and the biggest industry in the UAE outside oil and gas. I'm going to take some time to walk you through the impact of CBAM and similar sort of structures, the why around CBAM, what it aims to do, and looking at it through the lens of 4 pillars and how we're integrating it through our business and obviously into the European market from a reporting perspective. So the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, otherwise known as CBAM, is designed to address the issue of carbon leakage. It occurs, which occurs when countries with emission reduction policies face a competitive advantage against countries with less stringent policies. This mechanism aims to level the playing field by imposing a carbon price on imported goods based on their embedded carbon content. Europe is one of our key markets, therefore the impact of CBAM plays a significant role in our business. There's various objectives, there's many objectives of CBAM, but for the interest of time, I'll walk you through a couple of the key points, which I consider to be the most important. First one being the global cooperation. CBAM will encourage global cooperation on climate action. By implementing this mechanism, countries can signal their commitment to reducing the emissions and create pressure for other nations to take similar measures. We know just now the European Commission has moved forward with the implementation of CBAM. We also know in the sideline, we have other jurisdictions making waves and noise around bringing something similar. This will serve as a catalyst for international climate negotiations. CBAM also targets encouraging emission reduction. It provides for an economic incentive for both domestic and for foreign producers to reduce their emissions. By imposing this carbon price on imports, will create financial burden, which is like the pollution tax, the pollution penalty for high emitting companies, giving them an incentive to adopt cleaner technologies and practice, and hence driving forward decarbonisation initiatives. So from an EGA perspective, we're looking at it through 4 pillars, in particular, number 1 being the governance framework. CBAM brings together various different stakeholders in an organisation. It doesn't just sit with the tax function. We're bringing in environmentalists, we're bringing in the marketing and sales team, export, inbound logistics, looking at scope 1 to scope 3 emissions, IT infrastructure, and having the right architects. The governance framework is extremely important on day 1 to understand and set that tolerance and the commitment from the organisation across each function of accountability, responsibility, and how to implement moving forward. Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, what do we know today? We know that in the transitional period for CBAM reporting, we're reporting on Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. However, as we move forward into the definitive stage, the regulation as it stands is silent on the Scope 2 reporting, and it will be Scope 1 for the CBAM cash impact. As Roble had mentioned in the introductory, CBAM is dynamic. The Commission has agreed to review the transitional period in 2025 on the collation of the data. So as a moving piece of legislation, businesses have to remain agile and nimble in terms of their architect and their structure and how they're moving forward with the deployment of a system design and how to target this. From a practical perspective, the reporting was something that we have been extremely close to with our customers and also our indirect authorised declarants that clear our product into Europe. So raising the awareness, acting as the educator, helping to roll out this across Europe whereby we import has been a crucial part to the strategy and the rollout of the implementation during the transitional period. So this is an overall summary of our key pillars, our focus. The final piece of our jigsaw will be looking at the readiness plan and the execution of CBAM accounting, CBAM certificate purchase as we move into the definitive period come 1 January 2026. So we've heard a lot about CBAM, the practical implementation. We are also faced with the legislation provides for importers to report based on default values and also actual values. And I'd like to talk to you a bit about both and my view certainly on where we're at with that reporting. So when it comes to product level accounting, the carbon border adjustment can have either your default values or your actual values. Default values are predetermined values assigned to different product categories, which may be based on average carbon content. These default values serve as your baseline for calculating the carbon border adjustment. On the other hand, your actual values for product level accounting involve the measurement of the specific carbon content of your individual product, which provides for more accuracy and transparency through that reporting of CBAM. This can be achieved through, for example, life cycle assessments or similar methodologies to achieve and obtain more accurate carbon data that's going into the European Commission and ultimately to your end user, which is indirectly your customer. The choice between a default value and an actual value for product level accounting will depend on several factors, such as data availability, how accurate your data is to be able to provide accurate reporting and using actual values for CBAM purpose. You may have some companies that are not ready to do that, so they have that default provision that they can go in with. But it's important to note that the default values may not always accurately reflect the actual carbon content of the product. Therefore, if you take a longer term lens through CBAM reporting in other jurisdictions moving, you may find that other jurisdictions will not allow for default value reporting. So as part of the implementation, it's important to weigh up the different, where you want to get to and what is best for your business in terms of whether you would report under a default and then true up on an actual at a later point, or you do the diligence up front and you have the data accurately ready for the reporting on that actual basis. And I mentioned it, keep in mind that other jurisdictions are moving at different paces, and we know, if you take the tax legislation as an example here, we know that jurisdictions implement policy at different levels, and they're not a clone of one another. So from a preparedness perspective, it's very important in my view to keep an open mind and try to aspire to have the actual values. And then finally, I want to just briefly talk to you a bit about the interplay with IREC and obviously from a CBAM context and my view on that. So in the context of CBAM, IREC can play a crucial role in maintaining this accountability and transparency. And CBAM, obviously, as you know, is a policy mechanism designed to prevent carbon leakage and ensure that there's a level playing field in international trade, and also ensuring that imported goods are subject to the same carbon pricing requirement as the domestic producers. Now, IREC can be used to quantify and certify the renewable energy content of goods or services imported or exported. And this can help differentiate between low carbon and high carbon products by incorporating IREC into the CBAM framework. Countries can then incentivise the use of renewable energy in manufacturing processes and indirectly encourage the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. When incorporated into CBAM, IREC can also help align carbon pricing policies with the renewable energy targets, and it provides a reliable mechanism to bridge the gap between domestic renewable energy systems and obviously the international trade. Explicitly in the regulation just now, the use of IREC is not noted. However, it's assumed that IREC would be an offset for CBAM purposes. By using IREC in the CBAM context, countries can ensure that obviously imported goods have a similar or equivalent environmental impact to the domestically produced goods. And also it can help to promote the development and investment in renewable energy infrastructure on a global basis by creating a demand for these certificates. Overall, my sort of final point on this, the use of IREC in the CBAM context can enhance transparency, quantify the renewable energy content of the imported goods, and promote the use of renewable energy, and ultimately contribute to a more sustainable and low carbon global economy. I think it's worth noting that in 2026, in the definitive period for CBAM, this is something to keep our eye close on regarding the offsets and how other jurisdictions are moving, particularly maybe perhaps in the UAE with different types of ETS schemes being discussed. You've got Japan moving, you've got Canada, UK. There's various countries that are now moving with regards to introducing CBAM or some form of ETS scheme there, and it will be interesting to watch how this evolves and the use of IREC in the future, how that sort of pans out. And I think that's all from me, certainly, Robo. I'm sure I've given you some questions to ask me.
Excellent. Oh, fantastic. Well, first of all, I'll give a huge thanks to all of our speakers. Wonderful presentations. And again, learning taking place. I was taking notes frantically throughout. So I've got questions for each of you. We've got about 10, 15 minutes to go through them. I think that what I'll do is work in reverse order. So we'll start with Julie, and then we'll go on to Anita and go out to Jasmine. So Julie, you used a fun term for CBAM. You said, well, it's very dynamic. And I interpret that to mean, well, essentially not quite finished. So anyways, you mentioned that CBAM isn't fully enforced yet, nor are the regulations fully written. So we've got this sort of period over the next years where this is going to take shape. Are the policymakers and the entities involved in drafting the CBAM documentation, do they understand RECs? I mean, do they understand RECs and sort of how it's going to fit in? And what degree? To what degree?
Yes, very good question. So in my view, policymakers, they're becoming increasingly aware of energy certificates, carbon accounting issues. However, the policies and awareness can vary, as we see with the tax legislation, can vary across different regions and different countries. Therefore, it makes it very difficult to apply a consistent approach. This then in turn makes it very difficult for businesses to operate on a consistent basis because the legislations could be different. Policymakers are deploying policy on a different level in different jurisdictions. There's several issues associated with carbon accounting that are worth considering, and some of these include like the measurement challenges, how you accurately measure from scope 1 to scope 3. Scope 3 in particular, we know that's going to be an issue. Businesses are starting to get ready with scope 3 and how you feed that data in from your supply chain. The data quality and the transparency, the verification and the assurance of the data, i.e. reaching out in the definitive period, it would be mandatory to have your GHG numbers verified by a third-party independent agent. So there's a lot of additional cost as well to service the regulation, regulatory frameworks, ensuring that you're fully compliant and ensuring that your inbound, your authorised declarants are also fully compliant with it. And I think to really round off and to sum up, that I think the policymakers can sometimes underestimate the practical challenges that go along with the deployment and the implementation of the policy. And I think CBAM is a great example of that. We've went live with the policies, we're still evolving, and we're having regular sessions with the policy makers to understand the practicalities that we are going to be facing come the 31st of January on the first round of reporting.
Well, thank you very, very much for that response. And it's encouraging to hear that you're having these conversations with policymakers. I think that it's just absolutely critical that the policy itself doesn't develop in isolation from the market. So that's very encouraging. Anita, I'm gonna turn over to you. You mentioned the role of standardization, and I think that's it's really it's a key word for us. It sounds like it's something of importance to you. In short, why does standardization matter, right? And how can it support your organization going forward?
Thank you, Robo. I'd like to share several reasons of the importance of standardization and standards. And first of all is the consistency and the comparability. Standardization ensures that certifications and LC methodologies are developed using common rules, guidelines, and definitions. This consistency allows different organizations, industries, and regions to develop certifications and conduct LCAs in a comparable and a consistent way across the board. Without standardization, there may be inconsistencies in data collection, analysis, and reporting, making it difficult to compare products, services, or process. And second reason is the global acceptance. Global certifications and LCA methodologies often need to be accepted and recognized internationally. Standardization helps in creating frameworks that are acceptable and trusted across the board. And third reason is facilitating implementation. To implement products and services globally, they must meet certain quality and sustainability standards. Standardized certifications and LC methodologies can help streamline the process of meeting these requirements. This in turn facilitates international implementation by ensuring that products and services conform to established global norms. And the fourth reason is simplifying compliance. Companies often need to comply with various regulations and standards. Standardized certifications and LC methodologies can simplify compliance efforts by providing a standard set of rules that can be applied to multiple regional regulations requirements. And the last reason I want to share is enhancing credibility. Standardization enhances the credibility of certifications and LC methodologies. For example, when a framework is developed following recognized standards with granularity of original data, they are seen as more reliable and trustworthy by stakeholders, including customers, investors, and the policymakers. That's the 5 reasons I want to share with you. Thank you.
I really appreciate that feedback. And I mean, I think the representation that we have in today's call it's like a demonstration of exactly that point, right? That we can have 4 different people from 4 different countries all looking to essentially address the same challenge together. And so having this sort of standardized language is important, and it's great to hear this from you. Jasmine, we're gonna close out on you. You mentioned a couple of things, and I spent a lot of time in Thailand. I know that it's really on the cutting edge of a lot. One of the things that you mentioned was being the first country, I believe in ASEAN or the region, to develop these carbon labeling guidance for stakeholders, right? I hope that our listeners understand the significance of that, right? There's just so much confusion in the region. So anyways, I have sort of 1.5, 2 questions that go together for you. So first of all, you guys are leading the space in ASEAN. What would you recommend to your regional neighbors, right? What should they be thinking about? So that's the first question. And then second, if we have time, is what do you think is next in Thailand? You know, what are the next big steps? Over to you.
That's a good question. There is a significant potential to enhance the collaboration on trade, investment, and support mechanism within our neighboring country and all over the world. So in the next chapter, not just only Thailand, but also ASEAN or the sector should actively participate in supporting regional economic integration agenda, including the registration and establishing the robust national and international mechanism that promote renewable energy and sustainable economic growth, addressing trade-related issues. And the exporter will still have to focus on the reducing its carbon intensity by measurements, verification, and reporting emission. And now, as Julie mentioned, to introducing CBAM is very important for the export market, especially in Thai manufacturer. So Thailand will not be spared this impact. However, the EU implementations of the border carbon tax is likely to serve as the catalyst, prompting other countries ASEAN to follow suit and expedite the adoption of eco-friendly trade policy on the global scales.
That's just fantastic. Well, look, we've essentially come up against our time, so I'm going to close this out by first of all thanking our wonderful speakers for your diligent presentations, your preparation, and for answering these questions. I'll also thank our audience, and I'll close out by saying if you want to invite your friends to listen in on this, we encourage them to log on to the ADSW Live platform where they can find a recording of this session, and we'll look forward to seeing and keeping in touch with all of you. So tremendous thanks again, and we wish you a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.